Welcome into the Kevin and Jason show. I'm your host today, Kevin Messeri, here with Jason Shannon, as always presented by Cover One. Got an action-packed show for you today. Got to go through the Mike Clay rankings that just dropped. Seems like a good topic of discussion. Everyone's talking about those, especially in Bills land for negative reasons. We're going to get into those because they're interesting and a lot of good stuff there. We're going to get into practice days 6 and 7. But lots happen with pads still on, and then the blue and red scrimmage going to happen tomorrow. So I want to get in and talk about that a little bit, and then we'll recap all this on the Monday show. We'll get into the red and what happened at the blue and red scrimmage. But Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing better than ever today, Kevin.
Why is that?
I'm so excited because we're 1 week from the preseason. Football's actually going on right now is it the Hall of Fame game?
Yes, it is. I haven't watched today.
Yeah, I was confused because I guess they had moved it early before the ceremonies, but we have football going on right now. The preseason has started. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I should probably look at that and see what's going on. Just to, I think I'm gonna miss it because we're obviously recording the show, and the discrepancy for all you DirecTV users out there with CBS. And ABC not being carried right now by DirecTV. I love DirecTV, love everything about it, love all the equipment, but I'm gonna have to switch to Spectrum. Gonna have to get rid of my Sunday ticket because I gotta have. I can't not have CBS, and it's 7-0 Broncos, by the way, playing on NBC. So I do get this. Broncos 7, Falcons 0 into the second quarter. So that game is going on now here at almost halftime as we're recording this. Kevin Hogan is dealing 5 for 8 for 37 yards. It is preseason, and Kurt Benkert 6 for 9 for 68 yards there out of Atlanta. Matt Schaub's played. Drew Lock has played. So not seeing the best of everyone in those games, but it is preseason football. We're here. And I'm going to have to switch to Spectrum, Jason. So it just kind of is what it is.
I didn't even realize that was a thing until my Planet Fitness has been losing like a TV channel every day, it seems like.
Are they DTV?
Yeah, they have the DTV, and I think they're going to have to switch over now too because all the stuff left is like ESPN and Fox News and and that channel where they just show you the music videos. So
and both Fox News could be on because they're just feuding with Fox. Some people are feuding with Fox, and then you have obviously ESPN's and ABC properties. So
there's been no better time to be a non-cable user in Buffalo, I guess.
And then the Sling TV issues with them not doing locals and them fighting Yes in the regional sports network. So nothing's working right now. Everyone's kind of feuding because everyone's kind of cannibalizing each other. But Spectrum staying strong, so good for cable. Spectrum's actually been good. I think they do a really good job with Red Zone and other coverage. So I'm interested to change to that. I have to get into Mike Clay. I have to get into these rankings. We talked about the last topic. Bill show, Jason. I know we did. It's interesting. I mean, he has a logarithm that, by all intents and purposes, is a fantasy logarithm that I think does an okay job at trying to figure out what might this guy do on a fantasy level based on factors. Don't think it does a particularly good job on defense or particularly good with offensive line or relating wins to rankings and a whole bunch of stuff. But we'll start right at the top. Mike Clay thinks the Bills are going to finished on 22nd and goes 7-9. However, they have them as the 30th overall ranked team based on their statistics, which the only thing I can think of is they're saying the Bills' schedule is soft. Though, if you're the 30th ranked team, you should be losing in those soft games. The 31st ranked offense, the 10th ranked defense, obviously must be earning the Bills some wins. Really high outside linebacking core, get overall rating of a 3.4 in green means, safety rating of a 3.3 in green. And everything else is pretty much in bad shape, including the interior D-line that we'll get into in practice days 6 and 7 here in this next segment. But at the top, Josh Allen going for 3,291 yards and 17 touchdowns, 14 picks, getting sacked 37 times, rushing for 100 yards, or 100 attempts for 569 yards and 7 touchdowns, and a PPR rank of 21. I think that's just fantasy ranking. He thinks he's going to be 21st ranked quarterback. Is that what PPR 261 points 21 means?
Seems like it.
Yeah, he assumes Matt Barkley's going to get in for a couple of games, or he's going to do a little something. So that means he's going to play one game, really, take some snaps in another. Running back's interesting because he has LaShawn McCoy, leading in carries, but getting out rushed by Frank Gore. 559 for Frank Gore, 556 for LaShawn McCoy. No real rushing touchdowns, 3 there. 7 Devin Singletary for 319 and 2. Quarterbacks and running back TJ Yeldon making the team and going for 106 yards as well. No real rushing yards out of receiving yards out of the running backs based on his fantasy model here, we're going to call it. Is that disputable? I mean, Josh Allen, he really doesn't have much of Josh Allen, really the running number saving his fantasy year. Anything there do you agree that with his numbers? Do you disagree? Like, what's your thoughts on the quarterbacks and running backs?
Yeah, unfortunately, those are numbers that I wouldn't be shocked by at either position, but you're hopeful that Josh Allen has a better season than that.
Bad season.
It's a not good season. It's better than last year's season. That's probably a higher yards per game still with 15 games or whatever. At least it's more touchdowns than interceptions. It's a step forward, but it's like probably a half step forward. So you would expect more. If he has those statistics, they're probably not making the playoffs. The rushing stuff and the touchdowns might be able to save them as far as that goes, but that's probably not a playoff team with a year like that. And a guy like Mike Clay, who's I don't know what he does to project his stats out, to be honest, but I can't imagine him being him saying, "Oh yeah, I'm sure that Josh Allen's going to have a huge leap to year 2." He doesn't quite strike me as that guy that's going to give to him the benefit of the doubt like that, as a guy who ranked him behind Lamar Jackson in his quarterback rankings. Running back situation could come out like that, and it still wouldn't be awful, considering that the quarterback rushing yards, there might be an even split, even if they have a season like that where it has that split where it's like 550 and 560 for Gore, the 550 for McCoy, some out of Singletary, a little bit out of Yeldon. That's probably a good indication that McCoy was having a bad year and they found a replacement for him and started to give Gore more of those carries, started to find what Singletary was going to do.
Yeah, the replacement's Gore.
Yeah.
Which
I don't think that's what would happen. I think if we start, I said it last episode on Monday, if we have a struggling McCoy, I think that Gore could remain still the second running back the whole time. And if Singletary looks good in training camp in the preseason or whatever, maybe he becomes the first running back. He's going to be the one that's under contract for them. It depends on what Yeldon does too, but McCoy and Gore, both guys that they'd have to make a decision on next year. And I'd say the decision's probably no, unless they're amazing and they really have a desire to stay in Buffalo. So that might be an opportunity where McCoy starts slow, maybe gets hurt, and they have to put Gore or Singletary in there and take care of some of the carries. And then, of course, Josh Allen is going to put together basically an RB2 season or more in his own rushing yards. So
I agree.
It's not an unrealistic split. It's probably a pessimistic split.
Yeah, I would say pessimistic split. Like, this is if the Bills, I guess, are the 31st ranked team off total, 31st ranked offensive team. This is what it would look like. So at least that's probably accurate. Getting to receiver a little bit here quickly. 603 yards from Beasley and 2 touchdowns. John Brown only going for 650 and 4. Zay Jones, I guess, even the year he had last year, taking a big step back at 438 catches for 480 and 3 touchdowns, pretty inaccurate. But he still has Robert Foster for 517 and 2 touchdowns. Pretty much outside of Beasley, doing the Beasley numbers-ish. Really downgrades for all the other 3 top 4 receivers. I guess Foster's getting a few more yards. Knox, I mean, it's got to be a league low, 46 tight end catches. 24 from Knox, 16 by Croft when he comes back. Lee Smith and Tommy Sweeney, Sleeper Sweeney, only doing 3 apiece. Would have to be toward the bottom of his rankings, I would assume, with only 46 total catches from there. No one ranked in the top 30.
They have him ranked. They have the tight end group ranked 30th and the wide receiver group ranked 30th. They have both, which I do find it amazing that with what they have right now that there are 2 teams he has ranked worse at tight end. The wide receiver one I have a pretty decent
46 catches. They have some worse than that.
They have the Raiders and the Jaguars, who I think Jaguars still start like an O'Shaughnessy brother. They're worse right now. Though I'll say the Jets, if they lose any more, Chris Herndon time will probably be in that range too. There's a lot of teams that don't have like super good tight ends. Still New England, he has them ranked 28th. don't really have a viable guy. The Cardinals signed Charles Clay to play. He
Yeah.
has them ranked 29th. So I'm not going to fight over 30th or 27th or 32nd, especially with this group that I have almost zero confidence right now with our healthy group. But I'm just saying there's a lot of teams that are somewhere
Yeah.
in the vicinity of our situation at tight end. Not
Yeah.
every team can be Tampa Bay or Indianapolis or Philadelphia.
Yeah, you're going Jeff Swaim, Josh Oliver, third round pick, Ben Koyak, and James O'Shaughnessy for the Jaguars. That's really bad. This offense is terrible. Outside of Leonard Fournette, who you don't know what you're going to get from him game to game, if he even wants to play. When he plays, he's okay. I mean, Nick Foles, I don't think he's going to be very good. We'll see if he proves me wrong. Receiving core doesn't look great. Offensive line looks below average. It's a really bad off. They're starting Lorente McCray, by the way. I just had a shout out to Lorente McCray, old Bills outside linebacker, defensive end. So I think this is real pessimistic. Mike Clay's always pretty pessimistic toward the Bills. I think he gets him some views. I think fine, tight end fine. I think receiver's terrible. It's his worst projection set of them all.
Yeah, 30th isn't a good. I mean, just considering the teams they have in front of them, I understand if you're not as high as John Brown as maybe the people have seen him practice so
Right.
far,
I mean,
or
but watch him then.
you're a
Like, watch
little
him on
behind of
offense.
Robert Foster. Zay Jones, even though he came out statistically that well, had a little bit of a fluky season. If you just take away week 17, he's at like 5'10" and 5 touchdowns on the season. I mean, you can't just take away games, but I'm just, it was very much boosted by a 95-yard and 2 touchdown game and a meaningless game at the end of the year, which is as per what he normally does.
Brown catching 39 of his 85 and Zay Jones catching 38 of his 71 targets.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to go with that Josh Allen inaccuracy narrative, then there you go. But I mean, we're still talking about, I mean, the teams in front of them, you have Miami, which is basically Kenny Stills and Devontae Parker. So I'm not sure what I mean, Kenny Stills is basically John Brown statistics wise, right, in his career.
Yep.
Then you'd say the Bills have more around him than that. If Jacksonville, who has almost nothing except for guys that really haven't pulled through yet, Seattle, who lost their best receiver to probable retirement, and then the other one to the Giants. You talk about the Giants, and they've been just crushed by injuries so far. The 49ers, I mean, that's to have them 26th is making like pretty big projections on Dante Pettis and Marquise Goodwin. Carolina, I like DJ Moore a lot, but again, not a lot of established guys. So, you go through it, even the Jets,
I mean, who did Carolina even rely on? I mean, beside, I mean, it was awful in the first place, and then now it's just Jerry's Wright and DJ Moore, Torrey Smith, and Chris Hogan. That's worse than the Bills. I'm sorry, that's worse.
Yeah, I would say overall that's worse than the Bills. I think DJ Moore's got a chance to be. I mean, I'm not going to make this the Carolina Panthers fantasy podcast, but I think he's got a decent chance of being better than anybody on the Bills this year. He really picked it up at the end of last year and projects out pretty well. But the rest of that group, I mean, you're really got to be hoping that Chris Hogan's something that everybody thinks that he was going to be.
Yeah.
And then we heard so much about how we were so stupid to let him go to New England, and he's now been like the only slot receiver to never produce in New England.
Yeah, Gilmore was the one they made a good deal on. They paid him a ton of money. It was everyone that was the one everyone's like, oh, whatever. And then the other players, everyone was like so nervous to lose. And I was like, I don't think Chris Hogan's that good. Anyways, you look at Mike Clay's defensive projection does call the Bills a top 10 defense right there at 10. Notables, he has Tremaine Edmonds as the 6th ranked linebacker overall. Matt Milano 28th, Lorenzo 57th. So that's why he's counting Tremaine as an edge, by the way, not a linebacker.
Lorenzo?
Yeah.
He's counting Lorenzo as an edge?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. That makes sense. But I mean, that means he has the Bills 6th at off-ball linebacker, so he obviously ranks Milano and Edmonds pretty high.
Yeah.
As far as that goes.
You have Jerry Hughes, Trent Murphy, Shaq Lawson, Mike Love making the team, which is right. Probably Mike Love at 2.1 sacks. Hughes and Murphy only coming in at 5. Lawson coming in at 4. Seems low. We'll see. Ed Oliver getting 3. Star with 1 sack. Harrison Phillips, Jordan Phillips, he doesn't really like them. He likes that a little bit, but doesn't really like the interior at all. Cornerback, another grossly underrated one to me. Really, Trey's okay, 45th ranked overall, but doesn't like Taron Johnson, Levi Wallace, Kevin Johnson, EJ Gaines at all. Has Pitts making the team there. Poyer, Hyde, Coleman. Doesn't think much of Hyde for some reason. Doesn't like Hyde, but likes Poyer. At least in his model.
Yeah, I just don't understand, like, his half fantasy, half projection
half
model.
A real, half fantasy model, yeah.
Yeah, like he's a fantasy guy. Like that is what he is. Like, but I don't know. Leave it to anybody that has like any sort of evaluation skills to make projections. But first off, like just projecting the stats of every single player in record and win totals of every single player due to some mathematical formula or projection system. It's a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, it's Jaquan Johnson as the 40th, or excuse me, making the team with Siren Neal, taking 40 snaps. So he's projecting who's making the team. He's looking deep into the rosters and saying, I think Pitts and Johnson and Neal are making this team. He thinks Stanford and Voshon Joseph are making, Mike Love's making this. So there's a little bit of insight to think Mike Love's going to make the team. So I don't know if they
I don't think he's done an awful job of picking who's made the team. Honestly.
I don't think he did a bad job there at all. I think it's close to the team. He's got McLeod making the team, so Robert. So he's Tommy Sweeney, so he's clearly at least looking depth chart / reading camp notes, or because some of these names wouldn't be on there if he wasn't. But it's interesting to see. He's not dead wrong on that front.
I just think you're doing. It almost like you're working really hard for something that just doesn't matter at all. If you're doing play count predictions for every team and every player, like that just seems absurd.
And he's Corey.
They're not going to be correct.
He's got Corey with an E making the team. Just might be the most interesting thing on the sheet. 45.3 average. Likes him a little bit. Has Hauschka making 95% of his extra points and 85% of his kicks. So likes our team's game. The schedule predictions actually probably somewhat slightly interesting. Part of this whole thing, and I'm not going to get into each individual game. You guys can look that up if you want. I've retweeted it today. Got us beating really Cincinnati, Miami, Washington, Miami, Denver, Baltimore. Looks like he has a win, maybe skewed at home. Jets at the end of the season.
He has us going 6-2 at home and 1-7 on the road. And that's just like kind of what these projection systems do. You see it a lot in college, but I mean, he's basically saying with his projection system, if we play anybody who's better than Miami on the road, we're going to lose, which just isn't true. I mean, he has us losing to the Jets on the road.
Giants.
He has us losing to the Giants on the road, even just barely. I think he has us at a 49% win probability there, which you still have to call a loss. But yeah, if he has us beating Miami on the road but losing to the Giants on the road, I mean, that basically where we stand there. He's saying we're going to lose to 29 other teams on the road, and that's just like not how things work.
Yeah, so he has 7 games right in that 50-50 mark, right? Plus or minus 6%.
Yeah.
So, it's football. I mean, those could all be wins, really. I mean, that could push you to 10-6 right there. Could all be losses. Could push you to 6-10. But he's got him at 7-9. So that's the Mike Clay. Tweet us. We're interested to know your thoughts. I've already had some hot takes in my mentions. Someone says it's crazy the amount of hype they have in Cleveland. They don't, they're literally the Bills a few years ago, a few big names in offense. So Mike Clay's just kind of overrating fantasy stats there. Someone saying overrated. Someone says 31st ranked offense, bahaha, oh, Mike Clay, the number cruncher strike again. So these are some of the comments coming from 30th ranked by Luke, 30th ranked team, but we win almost half our games. And then you have a guy that's pretty negative. Scott says 7-9 being generous. Hope I'm wrong.
He is wrong.
Yeah.
Being generous.
Yeah.
Get out of here. We went 6-10 last year. Our team sucked.
Yeah. And then Steve says, awesome news. This bad word said we had the worst secondary in football when we had White, Hyde, and Poyer. Him hating on us means Super Bowl. Good point. Yeah, I forgot about the worst secondary in football.
32nd in secondary that year that we were the best secondary in the league, which has to
same secondary.
You almost have to quit a couple years of the stupid projection thing or change how you do it if you're going to have that happen to you.
when you get 32 going to 1, that's pretty wrong at that point. Like,
yeah, you can't actually go wronger. So
yeah. So
I will say one thing about it, just like in general, there are a couple units that he has ranked pretty low, and the fact is that we don't have the proof yet. We signed 18 guys in the offseason, free agents who, are of varying um, experience and playing times, have to gel. You hope that a lot of them play as good as they usually do or improve or whatever. But if you look at wide receiver, you look at offensive line, you look at interior defensive line, those are unproven units. And I don't know if you can project them to be average in the league or above average in the league yet. But I do think that those are groups that if things just click a little bit, we could really vault into the top half of the league. I mean, certainly there's a situation where things go a little right with receiver and quarterback where we have a top 16 receiver group. I think it'll probably be more like 20 to 22 or something. And then if you look at defensive line, like he's projecting out at Oliver, and nobody really knows how he's going to translate to the NFL. As much of a beast as he is, and as much as he's doing in practice right now, once the pads came on, it's hard to project a 280-pound defensive tackle. I mean, he might go and be, a poorish man's Aaron Donald right away, or he might struggle this first year and not be able to play on rundowns. You don't really know, but that's an interior defensive line with him and Harrison Phillips in the second year, and Starr, who gets fairly underrated by people. I mean, I think he has him ranked 23rd right now as a group, and I mean that could be 7th this year if things go right. And you draft an Ed Oliver hoping that things go right and that you get the best case scenario. But I think the early returns so far have shown that we could have something really dynamic there. That would be super cool.
Yeah, I mean, he says another good comment from Dave. He either has an axe to grind or he's not paying attention. It's a good point.
He likes the clicks too. We're the number one team to respond to these things, and ever since 2 years ago, he loves getting this attention. I'm surprised he didn't have us ranked 32nd. Yeah. To be honest, because he just loves it, and he's got the New York teams low too. He knows who's gonna complain on Twitter about these sort of things.
Yeah. And then he's got another Harry goes by a PTR promo. The robot says, with all the players we added, we're going to get worse. Okay, so good point. Added a lot of players. Are they worse than last year? His predictions last year. So I mean that's a Mike Clay. Go check him out. Tweet us your thoughts on that. Continue to do so on that. That's really cool to see. Did want to shout out to tweet of the day. I'm going to do a tweet of the day on occasionally on this show. I tweeted that went somewhat Bills viral. We almost revolted as a fan base when Elam was picked over Rosen. It seems like Bean may know what he's doing. That was my tweet. Went somewhat viral, but then on top of that, good response from Jim. Jim Havernick Jr. said, one looked like a football player, the other an accountant. It was a no-brainer. So really liked that tweet, Jim. Thanks for that one. Like the accountant shout out to referring to Josh Rosen. Thought that was pretty funny. Anyways, Jason, camp 6 and 7 days. I mean, lots of nuggets. I mean, there's finally a lot of notes out of this than other days. I think there's a couple days early on, even maybe one we were at slow, not a ton to talk about, but it is getting pretty competitive, and there is some good things happening. Injuries on the offensive line. Mich Morris is in the concussion protocol already to stage 3, which means probably only out this week. Should maybe see him against Carolina in that week down there. Josh Allen's taking some risks. Yesterday, he's making some good plays, but missing a few things. Ed Oliver was finally dominant yesterday, and he's getting his first team reps finally. He's really, I guess, dominating in a way so far. He's wreaking havoc, and even while getting double teamed. So I guess we'll start there. Ed Oliver coming out with finally getting first team reps, finally looking good. Pads come on, Ed's good. Is he something you're most interested in seeing in the preseason? Like, where are you at with Ed Oliver and his development?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's the first round pick. He's one of the most talented guys in the draft. You're excited to draft him. And I know, like last show on Monday, we had taken a couple questions, and I think people had asked about what would be the physical condition or how people would look like Ed Oliver or like Jordan Phillips. And the thing was that we just didn't see pads yet, and I said that not to be a cop out, but their whole position is physicality for the most part, and how they're going to move guys, and the intensity they're going to play with, and the focus that they are to keep their schemes while facing guys that are actually trying to outman them. And it's great to hear that Ed Oliver's been pretty dominant the last two practices. Today's, I believe, was only in shells, so only helmets and shoulder pads, but they still usually do a little bit of physicality there. But certainly yesterday, um, he was pushing guys around. I want to be optimistic and say it wasn't just because Russell Bodine had to come into the lineup with Morse gone, and we had a lack of Quentin Spain today as well, and also a lack of Cody Ford in the first team, which I also find kind of interesting. We can get to that if you want, but yeah, Ed Oliver is the guy that you want to look dynamic because you just haven't seen him here yet. And there's still like that little bit of like 5 or 10% doubt where it's what kind of player he was in college. Didn't always play as strong as competition. Got to play the position very much under the weight of your typical prototypical defensive tackle, and you think, I hope that works out, and I hope he can play it that way. I was guessing that he'd be able to, and so far it looks like the returns are there, and I think everybody on the team, the coaching staff, whatever, saw a guy that they're not going to be able to keep off the field, and suddenly creates a really different dynamic part of the defense that we didn't have last year.
Yeah, and just a quick injury update. Hughes didn't practice on Wednesday, and neither did Hyde. Said to have a neck. Guard Spencer Long sat out with knee soreness. Running back LaShawn McCoy was excused for personal reasons. Also, Robert Thomas, the defensive tackle, and Stephen Hauschka didn't practice, with obviously the crewman Knox, who really haven't practiced much.
And I believe that's day 6 stuff.
Yeah, that's day 6 stuff.
Okay. I was just making sure because
Long that's Wednesday.
Started today. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So that's Wednesday, and then Thursday, which is today. Center Mitch Morris was still out. He's in concussion protocol. Hyde was neck issues still. Quentin Spain was dealing with foot soreness still, and then a vet day off for Hughes, Murphy, Starr, Frank, and Lee Smith. Also, Long was back. I think he was the only one that came back from Wednesday to Thursday. Kirk Coleman stepping up already, the lead safety backup. So he's taken that role by Raphael Bush retirement, but I think Coleman's better. So he's starting. He's pretty much a lock right now after signing the first day of camp or the day before. So that's a good safety note that I think you can pretty much lock in Kirk Coleman to safety 3/spot starter, who had a spot starter role. I liked Kirk Coleman. I got a big deal last year in New Orleans. I think he's a guy that is perfect safety depth. You're not going to get a too much of a better safety 3, safety 4 there. So, real good for depth to have him with the two young guys on the team as well. So we'll see how that plays out with Neal, Johnson, and Marlowe. See what's going to happen on the younger. Maybe only one or two of those guys now are going to make the team. When Marlowe was a lock last year, he was a pretty steady guy in special teams. Neal was kind of making that transition. Jaquan Johnson, they really like to develop. So we'll see what happens out of that safety position. Offensive line, obviously Long's back. Got Bodine starting at center right now while Morse is going through that concussion. I think it's a good sign that Morse is already through to the third step from that. Got Cody Ford, like you mentioned, getting, losing reps to Ty Nsekhe. Is that the best way to put it? Who's also taking left tackle snaps.
Yeah.
Practicing the swing role too.
Yeah, Ford came in with the first when Nsekhe went to left tackle.
Okay.
I see it still just rotating a little bit, or they just saw what was there with Nsekhe. I still think that they're still looking for what the best 5 are, and the good thing about being versatile is you really do, for the most part, get your best 5 linemen on the field, especially if they're very capable in multiple positions, like Nsekhe is on both sides of the line, or Feliciano seems to be about the same at guard or center. Ford's still sticking at right tackle right now. So it is interesting. Again, it's hard to take too much out of it. It's good to take out. It's good to take who's getting chances out of it.
Right.
But I don't know about pure starters. Things look very different at the beginning of camp and at the end. You have injuries where you almost don't want to play the top 5 offensive linemen all the time because you want these contingency plans. So, as you see with a tight end position, which gets dismantled in the span of like a day, and then you have an offensive line with soreness. You're gonna see a lot more of this rotation, and we really didn't have many injuries for the first couple days, but now that things start to get physical, when things start to get ramped up, obviously with the scrimmage, with the preseason game, you're gonna start to see these injuries and get to start to see more players rotate in. So I like that they're giving it different looks.
So you got O-line update, should probably fill you in. You had a retirement from Isaac Asiata, just signed, retired as a young player, so must have just wanted to hang it up. Good for him and his decision for his family.
He wrote an incredibly long Instagram post that I didn't read.
Okay.
Like, it was so long that I couldn't read it.
Okay.
But I'm sure his family did, and the people who care about him. Hopefully he's just getting out of football healthy, and
good.
Possibly saw that he didn't quite have it when he started playing.
Yeah, and sure. Looked at the Bills then just like, yeah, this isn't for me. Like, there's a lot of players here. I don't know if I'm going to get any time. I'm just going to hang it up. And then you had Jeremiah Searles released, guy I thought the team would stash, made a real classy post on his release, a video. He doesn't think it's the end for him, and may get a call from the Bills. Searles is a guy that I think around this time last year got cut. Bills picked him up. He got some time, so I wouldn't be shocked if this isn't the end for him, whether it's on the Bills or not. So watch out for that as he tests the free agent waters as injuries happen. And then they obviously signed Nico Siragusa, not related to Tony Siragusa, by the way, who is filling in for, I guess, replacing Isaac Asiata. So those are some housekeeping offensive line.
He was a 4th-round pick.
Yeah, he was.
Years ago. He hasn't gotten any action and has moved on a couple teams, but was a 4th-round pick.
Bad.
I believe San Diego State, but I mean, at least started with a little bit of potential. You never know.
Yeah, sounded probably like a Wyatt Teller type.
And that also makes him a practice squad sort of.
He was looking good, I read, and had some injuries. I think tore his ACL and MCL or something. I can't remember the combination of injuries he had, but was by all accounts taking one of the guard spots and faced a bad injury and really just finally getting back. So we'll see if he can't practice squad it up and then find his way onto the roster. Definitely a good candidate to do something like that. Or who knows how training camp rolls out if he beats out a Teller. It's not like unheard of. Big moves in the wide receiver position. Easley's had a good day yesterday on Wednesday. Shook out Ryan Lewis a couple of times. I mean, hey, I still think that position group is wide open. They'll do what they have to do to keep the best players and easily at least making a bid for the practice squad. Duke Williams been making some good red zone, caught 2 red zone touchdowns. He's struggled a little bit, but I mean, he's got that catch radius, kind of what you were looking for Benjamin. So we'll see if they're going to waste a roster spot or use a roster spot on a player like that. They have to this point with the Holmes and the Benjamins. So we'll see if they fuss the physicality of him being able to play teams. So we'll see how that all plays out. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to in the scrimmage tomorrow. As we'll get into that in a moment. And lastly, Tommy Sweeney positioned himself as Sleeper Sweeney. He's getting those number 1 tight end reps with obviously the ton of injuries there, with especially Knox, Kroom, Croft, with their respective injuries, and then Lee Smith I think had a vet day, so it was pretty much Sweeney and a bunch of limited undrafted free agent guys and journeymen behind him. I heard he had a good catch, jumped in and caught it over Poyer. And Dable was all jazzed up about that play. So that's one that sticks out to me. So Sleeper Sweeney, and also Sleeper Sweeney on Wednesday. He's been showing his dual threatness, not just being able to block. He's been a really good receiver as well, and he's getting more comfortable. And if he's going to be blocking, he's going to be on the field. So, and if he presents some receiving ability, he's definitely going to be on the field. So see what happens with Sleeper Sweeney as the blue and red scrimmage. Red and blue or blue and red? Blue and red?
I think it's red and blue.
Red and blue. Okay. As the red and blue scrimmage happens tomorrow. Jason, any notes?
No.
Got it out?
I just looked it up. It's blue and red. Red and blue sounds better.
I thought it was blue and
Doesn't
red.
it?
Yeah.
Blue and red's alphabetical, but I think red and blue has a better... Because red, white, and blue. Like we've been saying that our whole lives.
Yeah, I could see that. Any final notes or nuggets from game day 6 or 7? Any of those receiving things jump out at you? And Zeki getting left tackle reps. You like Easley, you like Williams, you like Sleeper Sweeney.
The receivers are probably the most interesting right now as far as what we hear coming out of there. I think it can be tough for a guy like Duke Williams the bigger receivers to really show until unless you're like just a freak athlete, to show until you get to real preseason games, real action, where you start making the catches. But sometimes it's harder to distinguish yourself, especially when you're surrounded with smaller, quicker guys. I think that the level of flash that some of those guys bring tends to show up a little more easily. You get more, I don't know, route catches rather than the big contested catches. So I'm glad that he caught a couple in the red zone. We'll have to see. I know also those small guys sometimes get an extra look because sometimes they present some versatility in terms of return game or playing on certain special teams units with athleticism. Sometimes, I think it's easier for Ray McLeod than it is for Brandon Riley to show out. Like I think that sometimes athleticism is obvious there. And I had Ray McLeod on my mind because apparently today it seems like the top 6 receivers is cemented in terms of how practices are going today. I'm sure things can go up and down. I'm sure they're going to give people a chance. A lot of receivers are going to get a chance during the preseason, but it certainly seems like your Brown, Zay, Beasley, Foster, Roberts, and then McLeod are the top group. And then everyone's kind of on the next tier of players with maybe, Roberts and McLeod being a second tier. And then your third tier being the whole other group with Sills and Easley and Williams and Phillips and et cetera. So, but those first 6 were really the only guys that were getting first team reps, I think today and yesterday. So, that's an interesting development. I'd say McLeod's the obvious one to be, to think about there. And McDermott's has praised him, I think, in multiple press conferences now, multiple interviews where he's talked about how McLeod's changed his body composition. I don't necessarily think that that he's that worried about using a 6th round pick on a guy because they cut 6th round picks all the time. But they obviously do have a little more invested in him than they do in Nick Easley. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes, if it changes. But really, I just want to see if McLeod's got something in terms of the receiving game. We're both pretty skeptical of him, of his size. The speed and athleticism ratio isn't particularly good, especially for a guy coming from Clemson. Wasn't particularly productive in college, but
really
they
didn't do
obviously
anything.
see something with him. Really didn't do anything. Was a pretty high recruit and just didn't really